I think shelter should be guaranteed. I think food should be guaranteed because, again, we want the capitalist society and all the good things that benefits us. I do like the system of capitalism. I think it's
Okay, so he just argued for the decommodification of the food and housing industry, which I think is based. Just those two policies alone, if enacted in America, would make America like probably the closest to socialism of any country on earth right now. So I think that's cool, you know. So I know where this is going to go. I know that they're going to argue. I think one of the things that commies or lefties or whatever do that bothers me a little bit is it seems like they are often very bad at identifying what to be happy about. If people hear Ethan say like, "Oh, I like capitalism. I think it's done good," but then he talks about how he thinks that like you should decommodify essential goods and protect the rights of workers. There's like an underlying set of moral beliefs that Ethan holds which are favorable to us and morally good, you know? I guess what I'm saying is I would take a sincere, heartfelt, genuine social democrat over a LARPy ML any day, like a billion trillion times over.
And education.
and
yeah. Healthcare.
Right, and healthcare should be too.
Yeah.
Healthcare, should be, and education should be too. You're right, and it makes sense to me because you want to exist in this world where it's all about money, it's all about market forces and all this shit. So you can't just regulate on the top; you have to regulate on the bottom too to control for the outcome.
So far, this all seems based. I don't know like if this is going to go in a negative direction because this seems quite good, as I understand it.
I think you just described as almost social democrat to a T. I mean, this is what think like FDR Democrat.
I love his second Bill of Rights.
Yeah, Democrats pre like 1970s is everything that you're describing.
Dude,
at least
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think this would be closer to social democrats in Europe in like the 1920s. The ones who were generally aligned with the socialists, in some cases, not all. I remember, Luxembourg didn't think that socialism was viable, or at least not presently, but a lot of them were motivated by pretty similar, I guess, ideological inclinations.
Ethan, describe one good thing about capitalism. First of all, I think it's like the natural inclination.
Yeah, wait, hold on. Oh, fuck, dude. Is this whole thing going to be like Hassan's side of the fans being really toxic? If you want to move people over to the left, you do not listen to them go on a spiel about how they want to like do all these great things. And like, okay, but you're still a capitalist. Explain why you should be put up against the wall. Like a 12-year-old type that out.
Of some people, like I don't think it's even realistic to say I want to live in like a perfect communistic society because that just doesn't work. It's antithetical to human nature. But I do think there are good things of.
I don't like human nature arguments. I think Ethan is wrong there. But we can continue.
I don't hate the idea of like people who can be successful. I think it's good that people can achieve success in the term monetary success. I mean, that's what that means, right? I do. There's nothing wrong with that.
I think the right approach to this would just be to hear what he's saying and think, okay, what are his real issues? And is there a way to pitch things correctly to him? For instance, I think you can easily make a case for innovation and success, even within the framework of a socialist society. I think there are easy ways to make that argument. Maybe he doesn't understand. Maybe he doesn't, he doesn't have a sort of, an agreeable understanding of what communism might entail. Maybe in his mind, there would be like genuine problems. But I think a lot of people are really quick to assume malice, I guess.
It's good. I think it's good. Yeah, right. It encourages efficient production, right? I mean, if there's a money incentive, like if everything was owned by the government, it would remove a lot of.
See, like, for instance, I don't think communism is being owned by the government. I don't think socialism is everything being owned by the government either. So you can hear that and you can think, okay, so when Ethan thinks of socialism, he thinks of total government control. Now, that's not socialism, so then maybe we can, like, correct misunderstandings. But I have a feeling that he's going to see a bunch of comments and it's going to be people like, you filthy capitalist.
I am a capitalist. What do you want? You know what I mean? Yeah, and I think but the thing is, like, they think that like workers should share in
that's the fundamental difference is that
workers should get a percent of your earnings, essentially, a percentage of their production.
Well, more than just a percent of production, a percent of ownership as well.
I don't agree with that. I don't think. I mean,
There you go. That's the closest thing I've heard so far to like a real ideological aversion to socialism.
in some cases it's true, but I think you do have a obligation to make sure your employees are well provided for.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that's for sure. Suck it, chat. You're watching a capitalist pig. Deal with it. I don't know what the fuck. You guys are all like radical communists. There's that many radical communists.
They're not radical communists. Not everybody that's anti-capitalist is a communist.
It is kind of a
any-
radical take that being it's like full anti-capitalist. I mean, you're essentially advocating to change the entire structure of all societies today on Earth. That's not radical.
I think I think the problem is like this is kind of fucked from the get-go because with Dan there and with the chat behaving the way it is, it's essentially guaranteed that there's no way to like correct course, right? Like there's no real discussion that can be had here. He's going to be incredibly defensive.
It's like you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, you don't believe in capitalism as a governing
What it comes down to
concept.
me too is I don't think arranging society based on greed is good for the human spirit, and I think we see the consequences of that.
I think this is a bad argument to make in favor of socialism. People will respond to and try to maximize their own conditions within the material conditions they're born into and live within. I don't think that socialism is about willfully rejecting greed or like living a monastic lifestyle of purity outside of like hedonistic commercial and commodity pursuits. You know, I don't think it's about like rejecting an element of human behavior. People are going to be greedy in capitalism, socialism. It doesn't matter. Like greed is just a part of human behavior, but it responds to incentive structures, like with everything else. So the goal then is, okay, so humans are often greedy. What can we do to build a system that takes that into account and produces the best outcomes?
Because if we're like, yo, we need communism, and everybody needs, greed is bad, and nobody, everyone is equal. The cycles are going to rise to the top, and they're not going to fucking do what needs to be done. It's just not going to happen, and it's not realistic. People are going to cut. They're not going to live that way. They're not going to live that way. The psychopaths, which there's going to be like 10, 20% are just full-on psychopaths, are the ones that are going to become powerful, and they're going to take advantage of the system. They're going to become our oligarchs. They're going to become
So do you believe that
exploitative.
Do you think the United States
There will always be power-hungry, highly driven people who are very unconcerned with the well-being of others. But I think that most people would agree that democracy has done a better job filtering out those people than, say, monarchy, right? So you can make the same arguments for economic democracy. Maybe there will be like really bad guys who still rise to the top in, say, a market socialist system. But don't you think it's more likely that managers would be good to the people beneath them if they were voted on by the workers who they have to deal with? Like, generally speaking, just as a very baseline procedural, like how do we arrive at leadership? Choosing our leaders seems to be better than leaders being undemocratically appointed or simply taking position by force. So we start with that, that's step one.
And so again, I'm looking at social democracy like in Scandinavia and saying, this is a model society, and it's as close as we're going to get as an equitable society, realistically, too.
Yeah.
I think that's a very bad thing to say. I think it's very arrogant to look at the way things are now and to go like, yeah, we've basically reached it. We've basically reached the end. Yeah. Well, people have always said that. Like, always people have said that, It's like everyone thinks they're at the end of history when they lack the political education to perceive what might be improved upon.
I think that, an incrementally pushed left society that's moving away from capitalism a little bit would likely have companies use profit sharing models with their employees on a much bigger basis. And you see some companies doing that.
No. It has to be ownership, not profit sharing. Profit sharing on its own is almost tangential. The whole point is the abolition of the bourgeoisie. You can't do that. You gotta hit on the specific ideological points. It just I don't know. It just reminds me a little bit of like the vagueness that I heard from a lot of like, I don't know, Bernie-crats, where it's like, well, we need something different. We need a different system. And then it's like, well, what's this? And they're like, So something different.
It's just a matter of
rather than
how
right
fairly...
now, which the goal always is to pay your workers as little as possible. That is, and that's not like a secret.
And that's human nature, bro. That's why we need to adjust.
Oh God. It's all come tumbling down, tumbling down, tumbling down.
There are people who are going to be extremely innovative and effective that are going to be motivated by wanting to be really rich and really powerful.
Yeah, I mean,
Elon Musk is a good example.
He's certainly not the example I would go to if I was trying to demonstrate the value of entrepreneurship and self-interest in a capitalist system. Whew. What he said, by the way, is just wrong. I don't think there's any reason to believe that the belief that you might achieve great wealth is a necessary incentive and motivator to people doing cool innovations. I just don't believe that's true. So many of our innovations on a technological and social level are done by just regular workaday Joes. And if you want to go with the Elon Musk example, Elon has never invented a single thing in his entire life. He pays engineers to invent, and they're not making billions of dollars off what they produce. If anything, this is an argument in favor of worker-controlled corporations, because the people who actually do the innovation are almost always employees. You know, companies are very rarely run by coders or engineers. They're usually hired by companies. Maybe there'd be more of an incentive for them to produce if they shared in the company.
And I also think that I don't think that we should regulate how rich people can be if they're existing in that sandbox. Like I'm not going to come out here and say billionaires shouldn't exist, because if you can become a billionaire in this sandbox where you're paying your fair share to provide for people in this way, making sure you live in a society where people get houses, where people get food, where people get education. If you can do all that and still be a billionaire, then there's no problem with that, in my opinion.
This is one of those things where all the preconditions move the goalpost past a point. Like, you can never be a billionaire and pay your fair share because you have billions. In order for you to be a billionaire and still have paid your fair share to the people who worked with you to that point, you would have had to have otherwise been a quadrillionaire in like a capitalist system. There's no system, like there's no system in which a person could accumulate that much wealth while getting their fair share. Like for Elon, right? 200 billion for what? Tesla? He hasn't done the work. The people who work at Tesla have done the work. And even then, the wealth is almost entirely in market over evaluation. It's not actually like for the things he's produced. Evaluated higher than any American car company in spite of selling fewer cars than them. Percentage-wise, what's a fair share? I don't think the bourgeoisie should exist. Elon Musk should own the company just as much as every other person who works there. If Elon Musk wants to maintain his position as CEO of Tesla, what they can do is elect him to that position. And none of them will, because he's a monstrous, miserable retard who is incapable of making even passably decent business decisions, as he is evidenced to all of us clearly day by day on Twitter. So there is no world where Elon Musk is CEO under socialism, because no one would elect him.
Is that even an attainable thing without being an immoral person?
Billionaire has become a huge range. You know, look at people on the top. They're worth 200, 300 billion.
Yeah, Elon Musk billionaire is like a lot more than a 1 billionaire.
Can you become that rich without doing horrible things? Definitely not. Can you get $1 billion without doing horrible things? Probably.
The goalposts keep shifting, where it's like, okay, well, you could have 1 million and it's ethical. Okay, well, you can have 10 million and it's ethical. And now it's like, oh, well, yeah, he's a billionaire, but he's like a small billionaire, you know? By the time I'm an old man, it's going to be like, okay, look, he has a few trillion. Let's not pretend that's anything like Elon, Musk Jr.
Well, billionaire shouldn't exist as a snappy slogan. Maybe you can quibble about where the line of acceptability is, but I think you understand in principle that at a certain point that...
Oh, and remember that the wealth of billionaires is underestimated because almost all of them absolutely have illegally held money in offshore islands. Remember, Panama Papers, over $10 trillion held overseas. A lot of that is held just by individual oligarchs who want to keep their money safe from taxation, just keep it in a little bucket somewhere. We're talking about an amount of money which exceeds like the entire fucking U.S. discretionary federal budget 10 times over.
Mm-hmm. So what's that times 250? You know what I mean? Like the difference is...
No, that's enough. I've made my point. I've watched enough H3 stuff for now. I hope at some point a coherent iteration of socialist theory is delivered to Ethan Klein. In the meantime, I'm done with this for now.